Good afternoon. Dr. Maricar, can we try if you can share your screen?
Hello.
Yes po.
Wait,
Can we yes po.
I'll try ha.
Yes po. And also with Sir Art later. Your audio is clear po, Dr. Reyes.
Sure. Here, we see it again. At the campus. And for the one with the Can you see ang Pichi?
Yes po, but it's not yan. Okay po.
Naka-ano na siya? Yan. Naka-attendant.
Do you have audio recording po there?
No,
Or
no, no, no. No, hindi siya audio recording.
Okay. Okay. So you will control po.
Yes, yes.
Okay, yes po. Thank you,
Naman.
Doc.
Alright, sige. So,
How about
yan
Sir
ako
Art?
muna.
Sir Art,
Hello po, good evening po.
can you try sharing your screen po?
Okay po.
Yes, and your mic audio also okay.
Doc, pa-switch off lang po ng sharing nyo. Can you see my screen po?
Yes po. Yes. You also have live audio din sa'yo po, Sir Art.
Yes po.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you po.
Hi, Ma'am Drixie. Can we hear you? Can you hear your microphone? Can you use your mic? Ma'am Dixie? Ma'am Dixie, are you there? Can we hear you?
Hello po, good evening. Can you hear me po?
Yes po, loud and clear. Okay.
Okay, thank you po.
So we shall wait for some more minutes po. We shall be playing some recordings, videos before we start. Thank you po.
warmth of the sun that shines on your dreams. Love is everywhere, all around the Philippines. Love in our smiles. This place holds the key to the magic. Hand in hand, walk through the city streets, or dance on golden sand. Love is everywhere. Love the Philippines. Love is everywhere. Love the Philippines. Love the Philippines. Beauty surrounds us, scenic sanctuaries. These islands, the harsh seas, nature that nurtures and bursts of flavors in the Philippines. Your heart will savor. Love is everywhere. Love the Philippines. Love is everywhere. Love the Philippines. Love the Philippines. Love the Philippines. Son Visaya. Our traditions found in our hearts and our soul. Love will lead you, and to embrace you know it's wrong. Love
Organisasyong part ang itinatag para sa aming mga ratek ng bayang liyag, sa aming patuloy na paglinang ng kaisipan at pag-unlad ng panahon ay sabayan. Ikaw, ako, sila, tayo'y magkaisa. Sa medisina tayo ay mahalaga. Ito'y handog nating mga ratek sa bansang Pilipinas, nating sinisinta. Si Rowen Jen, ama ng aming profesyon, liwanag na hatid, dala niya ay pag-asa. Ang teknolohiko, radyolohiko, tungkulin ko sa bawat tao. Ikaw, ako, sila, tayo'y magkaisa. Sa medisina tayo ay mahalaga. Ito'y handog nating mga ratek sa bansang Pilipinas, nating sinisinta. Isigaw at magsaya, mga ratek ay mahalaga. Profesyong teknolohiko, radyolohiko, ipagpunyi natin sa mundo. Ipagpunyi natin sa mundo.
A very warm welcome to everyone joining us from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, Philippines, across Asia, and to our colleagues and friends all around the world. Welcome to CPD Asia. This is the online continuing professional development platform for Asian Radiologic Technology Societies, dedicated to learning, collaboration, and professional growth beyond borders. And tonight, hosting the 63rd CPD Asia is the Philippine Association of Radiologic Technologists, or PART. I'm Peachy Luna, CPD Secretary General, and truly my honor to be your CPD Asia program host. To everyone watching, we are live streaming on YouTube. Please search the PARI and VART channels so you can join us live or watch the replay at your convenience. This CPD Asia program is highly supported and graciously graced by our member societies and represented by their presidents, officers, and official representatives. With great respect, may we acknowledge and warmly welcome the Macau Radiological Technologies Association, represented by Chairman Jerry Pedrolay.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Jerry. And congratulations to the Philippines Society to host this CPD program.
Thank you, sir. Also, we have the President of Perhimpunan Radiographer Indonesia, PARI, Dr. Gek Subianto.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Pichi.
Good evening, Steve, sir. We have President of Vietnam Association of Radiological Technologists, VART, President Mr. Tai Van Loc.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Philippine Society today. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Also with us is the Hong Kong Radiographers Association, President Mr. Nang Tat Ming.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Nice to meet you again.
And yes, we also we have here the Vice President of Japan Association of Radiologic Technologists, JART, VP Sir Naoki Kodama. And Taiwan Society of Radiological Technologists, represented by Kui Yun-wo. We also have received greetings from Taiwan Association of Medical Radiation Technologists, from Singapore Society Radiographers, President Mr. Haris Abdul Razak. Also, greetings from President of Malaysian Society of Radiographers, President Sawal Marsait, President Mohan Lil Bagwat of Indian Society of Radiographers and Technologists, President Sophie Lee from Association of Cambodian Radiological Technologists. We have also received greetings from Hong Kong Association of Radiation Therapists from Dr. Vincent Leung as President, President Mr. Mohammed Abdel Ghani of Palestinian Association of Medical Radiation Technologists, and all our friends from Myanmar Society of Medical Radiation Technologists. We also would like to welcome our invited panelists who are here. We have Ma'am Cora Nang from Macau,
Hello, nice to meet you.
Putu Adi Susanto from Indonesia, Madam Chan Lai Kwan from Malaysia. Yes, we also have Vice President Chin Shun Yu of Macau.
Hello, everyone.
Yes, VP of HKRA, Sir Nelson Wan.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
And Sir Cheng Wei Li. All right, so I would like to request everyone to please open your camera along with the cameras of our speakers who are here and panelists for a short photo opportunity. Okay, one more. Yes, well, while you are taking photo, we have Sivila Intenseng from Lao. All right, one last photo. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. All right, tonight's theme, different roles, one goal, advancing excellence in imaging and patient care, reminds us that while our professional titles may differ, radiologic technologists, nurses, sonographers, radiologists, our shared mission is one, to deliver safe, accurate, and compassionate patient care. We are honored to have distinguished speakers who will guide us through diverse perspectives in imaging practice. So to formally welcome and open the program, it is my great privilege to invite the President of the Philippine Association of Radiologic Technologists, Mr. Ruben Lorenzo, to give his welcome message.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 63rd CPD Asia session. As President, it's my pleasure to join you tonight as part host this meaningful gathering. Our team, different roles, one goal, advancing excellence in imaging and patient care, reminds us that while we each bring different skills and perspectives, we are united by one mission, providing the best care for our patients. We're fortunate to have outstanding speakers who will share their experiences. Its talk highlights how collaboration strengthens our profession and improves patient outcomes. Thank you for being here and for continuing to advance excellence in imaging. Let's make this session both insightful and inspiring.
Thank you, dear Part President, for that inspiring and warm welcome. So as part hosts this session, we highlight the collaborative spirit of our profession. Tonight, we will hear about the unique roles of radiology nurses, the artistry and challenges of ultrasound, and the wisdom behind pediatric imaging decisions. Together, these insights strengthen our collective pursuit of excellence. So let us begin with our first speaker. She's a registered radiologic technologist with nearly 7 years in practice. Currently serves as a senior sonographer at St. Luke's Medical Center, Global City, Philippines. Blending clinical practice with education, she is also a part-time lecturer and clinical supervisor at De La Salle Medical Sciences and Health Institute. A frequent guest speaker, her recent one was at National Medical Seminar for the BFP, or Philippine Bureau of Fire Protection, as well as facilitator and trainer in ultrasound training workshops and seminars. Her topic, the art behind the image, ultrasound challenges every sonographer encounters. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Dixie Maturan.
Hello and good evening, Philippines and across Asia. Welcome to the 63rd CPD Asia, hosted by the Philippine Association of Radiologic Technologists. Before I begin my session, I want to start and share my gratitude to everyone behind this program, the association, and everyone present here today. Once again, my name is Dixie, and let me all walk you through my topic today, the art behind the image. ultrasound challenges every sonographer encounters. As a sonographer myself, I want to highlight and share what it really takes to capture a diagnostic image, turning sound waves into diagnostic answers, and the daily challenges we navigate in our practice. To begin, let me pose a question. Why is ultrasound uniquely challenging? The answer actually involves exploring more follow-up provoking questions because, unlike other imaging modality such as X-ray, CT, and MRI, they provide more of a static cross-sectional snapshot of the human body. The ultrasound is more on dynamic and live performance. Here are some questions that were more provoking that I usually encounter in practice. Number 1, have you ever struggled with a scan despite years of your experience? How many times has a bowel gas ruined your perfect scan? How many times have you had to ask a patient to change position only for the view to get worse? And how often do you find yourself fighting with the suboptimal machine setting just to get a clearer border? So why is ultrasound challenging? There are a lot of reasons why. Number 1 is operator dependence, the art of scanning. In the times I do lecture introducing ultrasonography to beginners, to my students, I make them realize one thing. Irregardless of what machine they use or they have, the success of the actual procedure really dependent and focuses on its operator. The operator, you are the one who collects the raw data and interprets at the same time. Interpreting is also a real-time decision making. If you don't angle a transducer just right on a pathology, it can be completely missed. Imagine you can't look for something on a post-processing screen if you did not even capture it live. This involves anatomy mastery. You heard it right. Ultrasound involves around familiarization of the actual patient's anatomy. It involves muscle memory. Imagine you were mentally converting 2D grayscale image on the screen but have a 3D understanding of its patient's human anatomy. This is also dependent on the patient's cooperation. The interactive patient physics evolves, changes every single time because there's no patient that is definitely the same. From technicality-wise, body composition, patient's pathology, demographic, and their status. All of this combined, one of the struggle is technical adaptability. This assessment, this imaging modality is again more dynamic because it's live in assessment. So this is the rundown of my topic. I will start from the sonographer, few of the technical artifacts and technical hurdles, patient factors, the physical and emotional toll, and lastly, its conclusion. Introducing the sonographer as an artist. There are the ones sculpting with sounds, bringing unique techniques, subspecialty expertise, and critical thinking skills to the exam room. With ultrasound, unlike any other imaging, it focuses and highly dependent on the operator. Let us dissect from the blank canvas or the grayscale monitor screen represents the raw data awaiting for its interpretation. If you have the canvas, you can paint it without the brush. Or in ultrasound, transducers acts as the artistic tools manipulating the sound waves. These are the one that converts one form of energy to ultrasound energy. That's why we are able to see images or the feedback of the sound on the image screen. Then creating the actual masterpiece, translating diagnostic imaging to clinical insights. Operator dependence in ultrasound really does come true. One sonographer as an artist, imagine two sonographers. There are two different artists. Scanning the same patient will produce two different outcomes. Factors involves number one is the probe angle and pressure. The image display on the monitor changes completely depending on how the transducer is angled to the patient's body. Imagine tilting the probe even few millimeters can hide or reveal structures that alters its appearance and of course its interpretation. It also affects because of the measurement placement. As a sonographer, they are actually capturing more on the dynamic, moving images. The sonographer is responsible to manually freeze the screen and place the caliper to measure a patient's organ, estimating the baby's length, as example. This also involves the factor of machine settings. Each has its unique techniques and preferences. Variation of equipments, how would they place their gain, brightness, focal zone between different machines. Also, operators can drastically change. Ultrasound is usually based by its operator. That operator is dependent on his or her own skill. They don't need a particular machines to have. They just have to bring their actual skill A game. The technical and artifact hurdles. These are the canvas imperfection. This occurs when the interaction between sound waves and human tissue violates the fundamental physics assumptions built in the machine. When this assumption fails, it produces artifact. And they're either obscure the true anatomy or generate fake structural images. We don't have the luxury of time to discuss all of the artifacts there are, but here are the common technicals and artifacts that we usually encounter as an example. Let me begin with the technical aspects. Going back to our blank screen canvas, this is where it all started. For you to firstly find the correct transducer to a particular procedure, knowing the correct frequency to use, to find the sweet spot of how would you present an image or the sweet spot of your gain, that it will not be too bright, it will not be too dark, but coming up with an optimized one wherein you can distinguish one particular structure to another. For you to be able to locate, find, and position the actual anatomy, an example here is your right kidney. I have a longitudinal and a transverse view. Be able to actually measure the actual size of an organ. At the same time, locating, identifying any pathology, and be able to capture it in real-time scanning. Artifacts in ultrasound. There are actually a lot of ultrasound artifacts, but I have here today for you two attenuating ultrasound artifacts. Number one is acoustic shadowing. Acoustic shadowing is when the beam hits a dense or highly reflective object like an gallbladder stone, bone, calcification. When an ultrasound energy passes through it, all of its sound energy is absorbed. On the other hand, we have posterior acoustic enhancement. The difference between two, if in acoustic shadowing, all of the ultrasound beam energy is absorbed, here, less of the ultrasound energy is absorbed. If you notice it in a highly reflective anatomy or pathology, all of the energy absorbs, it appears on the screen much more hyperechoic compared to a fluid like cyst or the urinary bladder. Now, if you look closely here, there is a gallbladder stone. Yes, it is hyperechoic. All of the energy and the ultrasound is completely absorbed. Now, the struggle commonly is, if a sonographer tends to depend on one single image, usually could have them struggle in real time making decisions. But again, it's better for the sonographer to not just rely on just one image, because yes, it does look the same. A bowel adjacent gas here in the gallbladder stone is both hyperechoic and has posterior shadowing. But in fact, going through its markings and footprints, a bowel gas tends to have its own peristalsis movement. Now, these artifacts could either alter what we see or alter our decision makings, but this also helps you supports and identify structures or pathology. Patient factors. These are our unpredictable subjects. Actually, in ultrasound, sometimes the best tool is not actually the transducer, but how the sonographer communicates to their patient. Patient factors in ultrasound. As I've mentioned earlier, this is one of the reasons why ultrasound is challenging. You have met for sure in an exam room different types of patients, from its physical build, shape, body composition, age, demographic, and status. Body habitus of the patient is the primary factor determining how would the sound waves travel through tissue, directly dictating image clarity, depth penetration, and the overall diagnostic interpretation. Patient mobility and behavioral compliance dictates how a sonographer's physical ability to scan the patient. If patients are not the same, sonographer's ability from one patient to another also adapts. There is a different type wherein a sonographer would scan an ambulatory patient comparing to an not ambulatory patient, especially critical or emergent cases. One thing also that struggles sonographers would be anatomical variation. Yes, textbook knowledge layouts of how would anatomical position of an organ would be, but there are actually natural structural differences in human anatomy. That's why, aside from the physical ability of a sonographer to scan a patient, it's also a matter of quick critical thinking and real-time decision making of where it could possibly be located if it's not on where it's supposed to be. These are factors that is really in toll, wherein patients is really unpredictable subjects in imaging because none of them is the same and build the same. So the sonographer adjusts in every patient they encounter. The physical and the emotional toll, the human element. Others would view sonography as a joyful profession, capturing the first images of new baby, heartbeat of the baby, but the reality behind the machine is immensely demanding. Operating as a clinical artist requires profound amount of physical exertion and psychological resilience. In the reality, among clinical sonographers, about 90% practice in chronic pain due to the work-related musculoskeletal disorders. The amount of physical demands, manipulating transducer while at the same time interacting with challenging patient creates severe physical strain. These are the repetitive strain injuries because sonographers perform thousands of movements with their scanning hand every day. Using extreme transducer pressure while scanning patients with high body mass composition, at the same time, just for them to maintain a perfect view of the screen, they usually do static postures, more twisted, lean over position that usually takes about 30 to 45 minutes per examination. The extreme demand for the sonographer, not just mentally, but their actual physical capability is tested here. Ultrasound is a real-time imaging tool. The sonographer is often the very first person to witness and navigate a severe pathology, a critical condition, or a fetal demise. Their responsibility is to maintain the ultrasound pace. Maintaining it gives a neutral, calm facial expression. There are a lot of times as a sonographer deals with diagnostic anxiety the possibility or the heavy mental burden wherein if he or she could be missing a tiny or subtle abnormality on a moving screen, this could possibly delay diagnostic to patient or diagnosis to patient. Compassion fatigue. These are where the times wherein there are a lot of heavy patient volumes, wherein you are given a short exam time. This also takes high diagnostic pressure. Here are the times wherein you are not just dealing with the patient's emotion, but your own emotion as well. So the composure must always be maintained, irregardless of what. In conclusion, we are now crafting the final image. Crafting the final image in ultrasound is once sonographers able to bypass physical barriers, surviving and managing patient dynamics, all of this reach to achieving one's personal goal, irregardless of how the physical and emotional toll, the real-time decision-making that they do in each and every scan, just to be able to give the patient what they really need so that the diagnosis would not be delayed. Day-to-day basis in ultrasound, sonographers do encounter different ultrasound challenges and cope it in different ways. Here are the 5 C's effective sonography you need to remember. Competence. If you encountered or realize that there is a problem, something you do not know or did not know yet, you can always return to education. This helps you maintain consistency. Make sure that the same curiosity you show on your first patient also still reflects on the last patient you do on your shift. Communication is one of the important tools in ultrasound. For you to know and let the patient tell you what they feel, it will help you translate it on imaging and helps the doctors be able to diagnose and have a clear clinical insights. Critical thinking is everything that we usually do in a day-to-day basis, dealing with all the hurdles, the challenges, but still be able to come up with the best image we have. And nonetheless, compassion. Compassion not just for the actual profession, for your patient, but also for yourself. Reaching the ultimate diagnostic goal, remember the true mastery of ultrasound lies on the operator's ability. Great sonographers do not simply capture image. They analyze, adapt, communicate, and think critically. Every scan tells a story, and every patient deserves the right interpretation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Maturan, for highlighting the artistry and challenges behind ultrasound practice. Your insights remind us that every image carries both science and compassion. Let us now move to our next speaker. Our second speaker is Mr. Mark Arlen, or Ark Consolacion. Currently, he is serving as a nurse manager for radiological sciences at St. Luke's Medical Center, Global City. With over a decade of specialized experience in this field, Ark accumulated nearly 9 years of clinical rotation experience across CT, MRI, ultrasound, and X-ray modalities before stepping into his current leadership role in 2023. He brings a wealth of practical expertise and managerial insight to the specialized intersection of nursing and radiology. His topic, different roles, one goal, understanding the distinct functions of radiology nurses and radiologic technologists. Let us welcome Mr. Ark Consolacion.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. Do you hear me okay? Okay. So let me start again. Good day, esteemed colleagues, fellow healthcare professionals, and organizers. I am Ark, and I serve as the nurse manager for radiological sciences at St. Luke's Medical Center, Global City. As a nurse who spent nearly 9 years of clinical rotation across CT scan, MRI, X-ray, and ultrasound, I am incredibly honored to speak to an audience of RadTechs today. Today, we are going to unpack how our two distinct professions build a single unbreakable shield of safety around our patients. Before we look at our individual roles, let's look at where we work. The modern imaging department is no longer just a scanning suite where patients walk in, get a quick picture, and leave. Today, it is a high-tech, high-acuity, and high-risk clinical environment. We are handling critically ill ICU patients, performing complex interventional procedures under sedation, administering advanced contrast agents, and operating powerful magnetic and radiation fields. In this ecosystem, clinical safety, physics, and advanced patient care must intersect perfectly. It is too complex and too fast-paced for any single profession to manage alone. To make this partnership work, we must respect that we have different primary drivers. For the radiologic technologist, your mandate is technical excellence. You are the masters of the instrumentation. Your primary focus is on high fidelity image acquisition, spatial resolution, sequence optimization, and mastering the complex physics of radiation and or magnetic fields. While for the radiology nurses, our primary mandate is clinical and physiological. Our focus is on the human inside the machine, monitoring head to toe physiological parameters, administering critical medication, managing airway patency, and being ready to intervene the second a patient status changes. Different drivers, different focuses, but entirely complementary. Let's zoom into a radiology nurse. Why are we here? Patients don't leave their medical vulnerabilities behind when they enter the radiology department. Patient with severe heart failure or compromised renal function is still at risk when they lie down on your scanning tables. As a radiology nurse, our job is to translate complex, ward-level clinical care into imaging suite. We look at the patient through holistic lens. Are they anxious? Are they hemodynamically stable? Is their RV site patent enough to withstand a high-pressure contrast injector? We manage this invisible clinical risk so that you can focus entirely on getting the diagnostic answers the doctors need. Conversely, let's talk about the indispensable role of the radiologic technologist. Without you, there is quite literally no diagnosis. Your expertise is highly specialized. You are executing complex protocols, determining slice thicknesses, adjusting KVP and MAS, and managing scan phases. Furthermore, you are the guardians of radiation safety, applying the ALARA principle of keeping exposure as low as reasonably achievable to protect the patient's long-term health. Once the raw data is captured, your technical skill is in 3D reconstruction translates abstract data points into clear visual roadmaps that saves lives. As nurses, we deeply rely on your technical precision. When we bring these two skill sets together, we create a unified care team. Think of it as one patient protected by two distinct shields. When a technologist is focused on adjusting the scan parameters at the console, they cannot easily watch the patient's breathing pattern or monitor an ECG line in a dark scan room. That is where the nurse stands watch. When both of us are aligned, we eliminate operational delays, prevent contrast extravasations, and ensure that the patient's journey through our department is both safe and efficient. Now, let's address a critical question. Why is having a dedicated radiology nurse a absolute must in an imaging area? It boils down to three risk or high risk pillars. First, sedation management. Many patients requires moderate sedation or analgesia to tolerate long, claustrophobic scans or painful procedures. Monitoring a sedated patient requires specialized airway assessment and capnography monitoring. Second, for contrast media safety, contrast agents carry inherent risk. From contrast-induced nephropathy to severe life-threatening anaphylactic reactions, the nurse is trained to immediately identify early signs of anaphylaxis and rescue the patient. Then the third one is the emergency readiness. If a patient goes into a cardiac arrest or a respiratory distress on your table, the nurse is the immediate first responder, initiating advanced life support, and managing the emergency code until the code team arrives. We don't just say the nurse is important. International standards mandate it as well. So we have the Association for Radiologic and Imaging Nursing, or ARIN. Uh, they have published clear evidence-based position statements on patient safety. During any radiological procedure that utilizes moderate sedation or analgesia, ARIN standards demand a strict one-on-one, or one-is-to-one dedicated nursing presence. This means the nurse in the room must have no other duties other than monitoring the patient and administering the medications. So, when you have dedicated nursing staff as well in radiology, the data speaks for itself. Clinical quality improvement studies show that proactive nursing assessment leads to massive risk reduction in the department. Nearly 45% of nursing led QI impact is seen in the prevention and rapid management of contrast reaction and extravasation. Another 35% is represented by a reduction in patient falls and acute safety events through proper risk screening. 20% is seen in the reduction of post procedure complications, such as hematomas after interventional access. Simply put, nursing presence directly correlates with safer patient outcome. To prevent critical safety gaps, we must establish a clear mutual understanding of our division of labor. This table highlights how our roles sidestep and support one another. For patient assessment, the registered nurse or radiology nurse conducts a primary clinical evaluation, while the radiologic technologists focus on immediate safety checks like MRI safety screening forms. So for device operation, the radiologic technologist is primary controller of the diagnostic machinery. The nurse only operates monitors. When it comes to medication delivery, this is strictly within the radiology nurse clinical scope. During contrast incidents, if a patient reacts, the RT's role is to immediately stop the pressure injector and alert the physician while they are instantly starts direct treatment, manages IV access, rescue, and administers emergency drug once it's ordered. So let's look at how this works in a seamless real world workflow. Patient path is a relay race, not a solo run. So first, for assessment, the radiology nurse screens the patient, verifies their EGFR, the red flags, checks allergies, and secure a patent IV access. Second, parameter setup. This is where the radiologic technologist takes over to load contrast protocol, position the patient, and prep the scanner. Then third, during acquisition, the radiologic technologist runs the sequences while the RN stands close by, continuously monitoring the patient's physiological state and comfort levels. Finally, in the post-scan care, the radiology nurse manages the recovery phase, monitoring the puncture site, provides discharge allocation, and safely transitioning the patient out. This is clinical harmony in action. In conclusion, our different roles exist for a single unified goal, getting the patient safely through the diagnostic process with the highest quality results possible. When radiologic technologists and radiology nurses work hand in hand, we don't just run a department, we deliver world-class clinical excellence. Thank you so much for your time, your dedication to your craft, and for being such incredible partners in patient care. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Consolacion, for emphasizing the vital collaboration between the nurses and technologists. Your perspective shows how teamwork strengthens patient care. And now we turn to our final speaker, Dr. Maricar P. Reyes. It is my pleasure to introduce our third and last speaker, the head of the Institute of Radiology at St. Luke's Medical Center Global City. Dr. Reyes is a practicing pediatric radiologist with extensive experience in diagnostic imaging, including magnetic resonance imaging, CT, PET-CT, ultrasonography, contrast media, imaging safety, safeguarding children's health. She's a fellow of the Philippine College of Radiology, a CT-MRI fellow, and a fellow of the Philippine Society of Pediatric Radiology. She also serves as an assistant professor at the St. Luke's College of Medicine. We are honored to have her with us today. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Maricar Reyes, our third speaker, for topic Scanning Children Wisely, Practical Imaging Decisions. Dr. Maricar?
Good evening, everyone. Before I start, I would like to thank the organizers of this evening's 63rd CPD Asia session, hosted by the Philippine Association of Radiologic Technologists. Thank you so much for the invitation. Now let me share my slide. I would have to turn off my video to conserve bandwidth. Is my slide showing, Ma'am Pichi? Okay.
Yes, po.
All right. So, mabuhay, and a very warm welcome to all radiologic technologists joining us from all across Southeast Asia today. So, as a radiologist, I want to start with the fundamental truth. My diagnoses are only as sharp, as accurate, and as safe as your technique at the scanner console. You, the rad techs, are not button pushers. You are the clinical gatekeepers of patient safety and our indispensable partners in care. So today, we are going to talk about a vital shared responsibility, scanning children wisely. Let's explore how the clinical decisions you make at your consoles directly empower my diagnostic decisions in the reading room. So let's look at this image together. This is our daily clinical reality. We see an anxious parent, a vulnerable child, and us, the healthcare team. When you perform a scan and send it to my workstation, I don't just see pixels or anatomical structures. I see that child's lifetime ahead of them. The pediatric paradigm is a collaborative shift in our clinical mindset. It requires us to move away from the traditional workflow of how do I get a fast, noiseless image and move toward how do we get the precise clinical answer while preserving this child's future. So to execute this paradigm, we must align on a fundamental biological reality. Children are not tiny adults. During a hectic trauma shift, there is a massive temptation to pull up a standard adult CT protocol, dial down the parameters slightly, and hit scan. Biologically, this is highly dangerous. Pediatric tissues are fundamentally different. Their cells are rapidly dividing, which makes them highly radiosensitive. They have less body mass, meaning they lack the protective fat layers that act as natural shielding for deeper vital organs. And finally, they have decades of life expectancy ahead of them, giving any radiation-induced cellular damage a massive window to manifest. This brings us to the biological imperative, the physics and physiology that connect your console to my diagnostic screen. Look at the pathway on this slide. When we combine rapid cell proliferation with a longer lifespan and subtract the smaller body mass that fails to shield internal organs, the result is a dramatically heightened cancer risk, specifically leukemia and brain tumors. This physiological equation is why pediatric dose optimization isn't just a guideline. It is our joint ethical and clinical duty. When you adjust parameters to fit a child's size, you are actively protecting their DNA. Let me back this up with the hard data we radiologists evaluate when assessing clinical justification. For a child under the age of 5, a standard high-dose adult protocol carries an alarming 3 times risk multiplier for developing radiation-induced malignancies. Because radiation-induced DNA damage is cumulative, every single additional CT scan adds a linear, lifetime cancer risk increase of approximately 16%. Every time you run a pediatric scan, you are writing a permanent dose diary for that patient. Our clinical goal is to keep those cumulative numbers as close to baseline as possible. Let's address a major structural vulnerability in our region, the protocol gap. Globally, nearly 90% of pediatric emergency imaging is performed in general adult facilities, not specialized children's hospitals. So look at the standard facility layout. On the left of the screen, we build heavy lead barriers to protect ourselves in the console room. But what is protecting the pediatric patient on the table? Too often, BC adult-focused departments run default adult presets on children because of time pressure or lack of pediatric-specific training. This gap is where massive, silent overexposure happens. And as technologists, you are the only ones at the console who can stop it. To close this protocol gap, we must apply the 3 pillars of decision-making to every single pediatric case before you press start. First, identify the target. What is the exact clinical question the clinician is asking? We are not on a fishing expedition to scan the entire abdomen and pelvis when the pain is highly localized. Second, evaluate the alternatives. Can we answer the question with a radiation-free path like ultrasound or MRI? And third, stewardship. If a CT scan is absolutely necessary, we must child size every single parameter on that scanner. No exceptions. As clinical partners, we must evolve past old radiation concepts. We all grew up with ALARA, or as low as reasonably achievable. But then, we now progress to ALADA, or as low as diagnostically acceptable. I want to emphasize this key takeaway to all of you. Stop chasing cosmetically perfect, noiseless, beautiful images. As a radiologist, I do not need a very clean image to make an accurate diagnosis. A grainy, noisy image is a badge of clinical honor if it answers the clinical question while sparing the child unnecessary radiation dose. And today, we practice ALADA-IP, making sure the scan is indication-oriented and patient-specific. So, when should we execute a CT scan? In major polytrauma or unstable patients, speed is life. A rapid CT is highly indicated and absolutely necessary. However, for stable acute abdomen, ultrasound is our initial gold standard. For stable neurological cases like headaches or seizures, MRI is superior because it protects the child's active bone marrow, which accounts for 27% of their skeletal marrow in the skull. And for routine pneumonia, a simple chest x-ray or even an ultrasound is more than enough. Knowing when not to scan is true clinical competence. Let's look at our first real-world case. So these images are from a 3-year-old boy presenting with a massive right-sided abdominal mass originating from the right kidney and proven to be Wilms tumor. So in general adult centers, referring physicians often order multi-phase protocols. You have your pre-contrast, your arterial, venous, and delayed phases. Please do not run this on a child. Staging pediatric tumors almost never requires multiple phases. A single, well-timed portal venous phase gives all the diagnostic and staging data needed. By working to enforce a single phase only protocol, you immediately cut that child's radiation dose by up to 75%. And that is the power of our clinical partnership. This second case highlights advanced technical stewardship. So these images are from a 6-year-old boy with Kawasaki disease who developed a giant coronary artery aneurysm. So the actual CT image shows you the heart. So labeled are the aortic arch, the main pulmonary artery, and then this giant aneurysm from the LAD. On the oblique CT scan, the red arrow is pointing to that giant aneurysm and the 3D image. So to capture coronary arteries on a fast-beating pediatric heart, we must optimize our physics. If you drop the tube voltage to 80 kVp, the photon energy sits much closer to the K edge of iodine. So this physical shift actually increases contrast enhancement, letting us use less contrast agent and a lower radiation dose while delivering gorgeous, sharp diagnostic images. It is physics working for the patient. Our third case is a 9-month-old boy with severe dyspnea showing this congenital tracheal stenosis pointed by the red arrow. So look at the image on your right. So it is extremely noisy. In many departments, technologists worry that if they send this noisy scan, the radiologists may complain or ask for a repeat. But I am here to tell you, we will never complain about noise if the clinical question is answered, because the contrast difference between the air in the trachea and the surrounding soft tissue is so massive, our 3D reconstruction software doesn't care about the noise. This is ALADA-IP in action. Scan low, reconstruct smart, and trust that your radiologist will back you up. But the absolute best way to optimize pediatric dose is to avoid ionizing radiation entirely. For pediatric intussusception, ultrasound has an incredible 96% sensitivity. In many of our local, rural, or provincial general hospitals across Southeast Asia, you might be the only imaging professional available. So if you master pediatric ultrasound techniques, you save that child from a highly unnecessary CT scan. It is cost-effective, highly portable, and perfectly safe. Let's champion ultrasound first pathway in our facilities. But when CT scan is the only choice, here are our 4 console commandments. First, do weight-based protocols. Always drop parameters to 80 to 100 kVp for infants. Never run adult settings on a pediatric frame. Second, limit scan range. Tighten your Z-axis coverage. Do not scan an extra centimeter of tissue just in case. Third, ban routine multi-phase pediatric scan in your department. Strictly avoid it unless it's mandatory. And fourth, utilize iterative reconstruction or deep learning to clean up low-dose noise without boosting the tube current. Finally, let's talk about your role as clinical partners. I want you to feel empowered to move beyond simple button pushing and step into active patient advocacy. If a referring clinician orders an inappropriate multi-phase CT scan for a child, don't just run it. Call them or call your radiologists. Ask, what clinical question are we trying to answer? Can we start with ultrasound or do a single phase scan instead? You are the last line of defense before radiation hits the patient. Practice actionable advocacy. Think size before you scan. Child size every parameter. And know that your radiologists will support you 100%. And to close, I want you to look at this image. This is who we are: technologists, radiologists, and clinicians collaborating around the workstation. Collaborative stewardship means understanding that the choices you make at the scanner console today affect that child's biological health for the next 50 years. Not every child needs a CT scan, but every child deserves the safest imaging path. Thank you for your dedication, your technical expertise, and your outstanding clinical partnership.
Thank you, Dr. Reyes, for sharing your wisdom in pediatric imaging. Your emphasis on careful decision making reminds us of the responsibility we hold on safeguarding children's health. Thank you also to our other speakers for those insightful presentations. So now let's open the floor for the questions. I think we can allot 10 minutes for the Q&A segment in the interest of time. I encourage everyone to please chat your questions in the Q&A box or here in the chat box here in Zoom. To our panel members, if you have questions or reflections for our speakers, please feel free to share them as well. Your input will definitely help us deepen this conversation. All right, so let me check. We have an audience who are watching us live via YouTube, and I am receiving questions. So let me read one question, and I think this is for Miss Drixie. Yes, Miss Drixie, can you hear me? Drixie, here is your question. I received via chat. So the question is, what defines a sonographer's personal style or signature when scanning?
Well, actually, signature and personal style as a sonographer is usually like a distinct scanning fingerprint. Even ultrasound is governed with strict medical protocols. I personally will tell you it's deeply personal. In such, it's usually highly subjective as well. In ultrasound, it's more on its operators dependent in a combination of one person muscles, memory, visual intuition, and strategic way of scanning. As I usually inform or tell my junior colleagues, especially when they're still starting in practice, even they do observe different technologies, they will usually see different styles and techniques. Even so, if that happens, we always come up with one goal, aligning in our protocol. So whatever works for them, that would be their distinct fingerprint of scanning. Thank you.
I guess I will have to make a follow-up. So what do you think? How much do you think is of this style is shaped by the training, the mentorship, and your, let's say, institutional culture versus the individual creativity and patient-centered adaptability? How much do you think of this style is being shaped by those factors?
Most of the styles usually comes up with one's personal learning skills and actual techniques, because in ultrasound, usually even you do learn it visually from others, it's matter of you practicing it and be the person who usually do the actual scan. Because even now, even the span of my experience in ultrasound, I still do make mistakes. I'm not that perfect yet. And then I always tell my junior colleagues and even myself, ultrasound is something that usually learned not just one day, but every day. And tomorrow, for sure, I will still learn one new thing.
All right. Thank you, Drixie. Before I ask Sir Ark, of course, ladies first. I'd like to address this next question to Dr. Reyes. So the question I received here in the chat is, if a technologist is working on an older standard adult scanner under intense time pressure, What are the top 2 or 3 manual adjustments they should prioritize to instantly child size their protocol? Shall I repeat the question, Doctor? If a technologist is working on an older standard adult scanner under intense time pressure, what are the top 2 or 3 manual adjustments the RadTech should prioritize to instantly child size their protocol?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. Actually, very, how do I say this? A very practical question. I mean, not every CT scan in the Philippines or even in Southeast Asia are already updated. So we have our older scanners still being used, and the default is the adult protocol. So you simply switch your KVP from the usual 120 to 80 to 100 for smaller children, and that would substantially reduce the protocol, the dose, the radiation dose, while still maintaining diagnostic quality. So that's the first. And then second, of course, just scan what is necessary. So you don't need to, I mean, you have to justify your scan length. So scan only the anatomy of interest, because sometimes we see like a CT scan of the abdomen, and yet the scanning field goes up to the mid portion of the chest. So every unnecessary centimeter scan would add to the radiation. And of course, I would like to emphasize what I spoke about during my lecture, that many CT protocols do not need multi-phase scan. So we only need the portal venous scan. So instead of doing multi-phase scan, you practice good positioning, immobilization, to prevent repeat studies. So those are my tips. Do the short range only the necessary range, and then lower your KVP, and then avoid multi-phase scan. Thank you.
Yeah. Doctor, I don't know if this is a follow-up, but the question is like, how do technologists balance the urgency of workflow demands with ethical responsibility of tailoring protocols for pediatric physiology? How do technologists balance the urgency of workflow demands with the ethical responsibility of tailoring protocols to pediatric physiology?
I think, Ma'am Pichi, the question and the answer is actually connected to the first question. So I think you have to keep in mind to really check the setting of your CT scan, the setting of your protocol. Make sure that you're not using adult KVP for small children. So like what I've said, that the default is typically 120. So make sure it's 80 to 100, and then just scan what is necessary. And then avoid multi-phase scanning. So those 3 things, if you would be able to practice those, that would lead to tremendous decrease in the amount of radiation that is being given to our pediatric patients.
Thank you, Dr. Maricar. Now I go to Sir Ark. Hi, Sir Ark. Here is your question. It is said here in the question: in a busy imaging department, we are constantly pressured by administration to keep room turnaround times fast. Tama yun, no? So here, it won't waiting for a nurse to perform a clinical assessment or insisting on a strict 1:1 ratio for sedation slow down our daily scan throughput. I will repeat. In a busy imaging department, we are constantly pressured by administration to keep room turnaround times fast. Won't waiting for a nurse to perform a clinical assessment or insisting on a strict 1:1 ratio for sedation slow down our daily scan throughput?
Well, first of all, I completely understand the pressure of meeting the the flow of the patients. So that's why I believe that we really need to focus more on. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, everyone has their own goal, and for the nurses, it will be for the safety. So I believe assessing them might require additional minutes, but uh, the fact that you would be able to what do you call this? The fact that you would be able to stop complication from happening would be much more important for me, because if in case if there's allergic reaction that will be experienced by the patient because of lack of screening, it would take more of our time. So I believe it will be better if we, even if it would take at least 2 to 3 minutes more in terms of screening and in terms of assessment of the nurses, it still matters because at the long run, we would be preventing much more complicated scenarios that would take much more of the time of the entire team. Then, most probably, safety of the patient as well.
I think this question is also from the same person. So he is asking this time another scenario. It asks here, if a patient's IV line extravasates or fails during a high pressure power injection, who is ultimately responsible? Is it the technologist who pressed the start button on the injector, or the nurse who placed the verified the IV?
Okay, so for that question, we you need to always remember that this is a team effort. So there are certain protocols and policies that we need to follow. So that includes verification of the nurses for the IV access, so as for the radiologic technologists. In our case, in our institution, there's an additional layer where the radiology uh, the radiology residents also checks for the patency of the line, which helps us to prevent extravasation more. So at the end of the day, if everything is good, if the backflow is good, if we checked everything okay, it's not on the individual failure, but it would be considered a clinical event. So, because for the CT scan, for all procedures with injector machine, there are also chances that there's extravasation. But at least the good thing is that everyone on the team tried to do what they can to prevent it from happening.
Yeah, I would agree. So siguro that scenario talaga highlight the need for a clearer shared accountability model, right? Where the technologists and the nurses working in same place jointly own, patient safety outcomes rather than drawing a rigid line of blame. Okay. All right. So I'll go back to Miss Trixie. Miss Trixie, are you still there? Can you open your camera? I know everybody would want to see you. And here is your question. Okay. So, Miss Trixie, where do you draw the line between the clinical drive for an exceptional ultrasound image and the physical necessity of protecting yourself from repetitive strain injuries, RSI, during scanning?
Oh, as I mentioned on my lecture earlier, approximately about 90% of sonographers do practice in chronic pain. I myself usually would do extend beyond my own capability physically. It's a matter of that clinical drive to do the patient right. It's more of the thing wherein it's the technologist's muscles reflex. Because if the image looking poor, I usually tend to push harder. And then the best way is mentally and way of you be able to recognize the true mastery of the physical strain. Because if you already reached that point, it's no longer you pushing it even harder or extending yourself more than you expected to do. It's about probably changing the technical techniques. If the patient is really high in body mass composition, instead of you pushing the probe harder, better to probably change the frequencies. Or another way, if extend, especially for me physically, if I encounter high body mass composition of patients, I usually try to extend the best that I can. But instead of doing that, I'll try to let the patients do the actual cooperation or their part in the procedure. So I usually let them change position. So that time to time basis, the ultrasound procedure is usually not as quick as usually routine. Usually in our practice, we do have high volume of patients. So the diagnostic strain is also there, so the pressure is also there. So if that happens, if I extend my limit, I rather do a change of techniques, more on technical wise, or letting the patient do the part of the job at the same time, helping me together as a teamwork. That's why usually the best tool in ultrasound is not just the probe and the technical skills of the sonographer, but also the patient's cooperation or how the technologists communicate to the patient. So that would be able to came up with the best image possible for better clinical diagnosis of our physicians.
Yes, I would totally agree. There should be balance, and that balance can be reframed as part of professional ethics, I guess. Like when you safeguard not only patients' health through your accurate imaging, but also your health through sustainable practice. Yeah, so I'll go back to Dr. Reyes. Dr. Reyes, we hope to see you with your open cam. Dr. Reyes, yes, the question is, for decades, placing heavy lead apron or gonadal shield over a patient was taught as the ultimate symbol of patient safety. Now, major international bodies like Image Gently recommend this continuing routine patient shielding. Why so, and how can a technologist explain this new rule to a highly anxious parent who demands that their child be shielded? I'd like a question. I will repeat, doctor, for audience sake also. For decades, placing heavy lead apron or gonadal shield over a patient was taught as the ultimate symbol of patient safety. Now, major international bodies like Image Gently recommend discontinuing routine patient shielding. Why so, and how can a technologist explain this new rule to a highly anxious parent who demands that their child be shielded?
Again, thank you for that very good question. Actually, I myself was first surprised when I heard that they're no longer recommending the use of protective shield over the gonadal shield, because that was considered a cornerstone of our radiation protection for many decades. So the reason that this is no longer recommended is because a modern CT scan and digital radiography have evolved dramatically. So the modern equipments now actually are using automated exposure control that would continuously adjust radiation dose based on what the scanner would detect. So, ironically, if there is a shield over the patient within the imaging field, the scanner might interpret that area as being denser, and then it would compensate by delivering higher radiation output. So instead of being protected by a lower radiation, you're actually delivering a higher radiation dose. So also, in addition, sometimes because of the shielding, it could obscure the anatomy of concern. And then it might also create artifacts. And the result is you would need to do a repeat exposure. So for those reasons, use of gonadal shield is no longer advised. So the second question is, how would a technologist pacify a highly anxious parent who would might insist on still using the gonadal shield? So actually, if I were the RadTech, I would acknowledge the concern of the patient. Rather than just saying no, you have to educate the patient and the caregivers that that guideline is no longer true. with the modern scanners. So you have to give the evidence. Why? Because if you explain, I'm sure they would understand. So the key is we have to help the parents and the caregivers understand that we are not removing the protection. We are just replacing the old form of protection with newer, more effective methods. Thank you.
I totally agree. With the present times whereby we have smarter, intelligent patients who can easily Google or find answers to their questions, I think I would agree that, we as RadTechs need to apply that empathetic strategies when also conveying, important facts to pacify anxious parents of those children. So did you know that we have a lot of questions in the Q&A box? But let me see if I can manage to choose some of questions here. All right, so there's a question here asking, what was the hardest case you have encountered, and how did you manage to overcome it? Can you share an experience? What is the hardest case you have encountered, and how did you manage to overcome it? Let's start with Dixie. I think this can be a question for all of you. So, Ma'am Dixie, what's the hardest case that you have encountered as a sonographer, and what did you do to manage to overcome it?
Can you hear me po?
Yes.
Okay. One of the hardest probably I've encountered, actually each patient in ultrasound is not the same. So one case could be easier, and then the next one I would hit a wall. And then usually number one would be the hardest is uncooperative patients, also combative patients. It's a various of combination of both. Number one, immobilized patients, especially on intubated cases or critical case patients. Patient would just really lie flat. Imagine doing a whole abdomen ultrasound with all of the contraptions surrounding the patient. It's a matter of also of letting the patient be the one comfortable during the entire procedure, because ultrasound procedure, as we all know, is not that quickest as possible as one deep breath hold and when we're all done. It's a matter of me putting the actual organ on one image, locating what's abnormal, and then at the same time measuring and if there's anything that's remarkable to take note of. So it really adapts me each and every patient that I encountered. So I adjust one and another depending on what they need. If the patient cannot follow instructions, especially holding their breath, I usually observe and monitor how they breathe. So I will just usually randomly do capture image and then do rewinds. I'll do it simultaneously as I able to adjust then and then. Number two would be patients that are pediatric patients. They are one of the difficult patients you usually encounter in ultrasound. Even the standard protocol is to let them lay flat on the bed. Most probably they won't follow instructions in that way. So I'll let and talk to the patient's parents, number one. Because if it's matter of teamwork for us to get the benefit for the patient. And like as Dr. Maricar said earlier, before, during my early years in profession, I usually came up with the most aesthetic image as possible, the perfect image. But then and then realized during practice, it's more on the diagnostic image. So regardless of there would be like artifacts, I would go with it as long as it actually sees what they want to see and what the patient really needs. So each and every patient, easier to scan, difficult to scan, I do adopt because there's no other way, because it usually depends on what I usually see and let the what represents and what I show on the actual imaging screen.
Yes, thank you, Dixie. Yes, before we go to Dr. Maricar, Sir Art, can you share one most challenging and hardest case that you have encountered, and how did you deal with it?
Well, Miss Pichi, for me as a radiology nurse, because diagnostic imaging, we have several cases of patients who had just had chemotherapy. So most probably the IV access wouldn't be that easy, especially if it will be requiring a bigger bore needle. And then there are some procedures that we do have limitation that we we would just use the right brachial part or the antecubital part for a better image. So that's the hardest part for me. So what I usually do is just to make sure to properly assess. So though sometimes it takes more time, and I believe for this specific skill, it takes time for you to master IV insertion. So um it's better, I mean, when I am around someone who is newer than me, I make sure to teach them that it's really not that simple. And aside from you mastering the IV insertion, you still need to talk to the patient, and some of them cannot really understand the reason why. So you just really need to make sure to explain it well, the way that they would be understanding it, and as much as possible do it on the best part. So assess well and make sure that um, at least you are 100 to 110% that it wouldn't extravasate. So that's the hardest, and I think most of us still experiences this because some of our studies we really cannot control. We really need the bigger bore, but the patient's veins are not that good.
Yes, thank you, Sir Ark. Actually, we have a lot of questions for you in the chat box. But yes, Dr. Maricar, can we hear your answer for that very interesting question? I wonder what's the hard, if there is a hard, challenging case for Dr. Reyes here. We're all
Uh,
listening.
yeah, actually, maybe one of the most difficult pediatric imaging cases is not necessarily the rarest disease, no. It's involving children who are critically ill and sit at the border between needing immediate imaging and avoiding unnecessary radiation. So actually, there are times when you have a sick child and then the answer is unclear. Maybe the clinical team would want a CT scan, but the parents are anxious. And then MRI would be an option, but MRI is not immediately available. And the diagnosis remains uncertain. So during these times, teamwork between clinicians, radiologists, and technologists become very important. But actually, in some in suspected child abuse or what we call non-accidental trauma, this is often one of the most difficult for or challenging for the pediatric radiologists, not because of the imaging findings alone but because of the consequences of potentially missing or misinterpreting the diagnosis, because it can have profound effects both for the child and the child's family. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, Doctora, there are also two questions. It's somewhat related. This is about ALADA. The question is like, would you still consider ALADA method for a pediatric cancer patient with radiotherapy co-management? Another question similar to that is, would you still consider ALADA for a pediatric cancer patient with radiotherapy management? Before we go to some panelists who would like to share or give their reflections. Yes, Dr.
Yeah, I think kasi the ALADA, the thing with ALADA is you don't need the perfect image, the noiseless image, no. So we just aim for an image that is good enough to give the diagnosis. It doesn't have to be the nicest image. So yes, the answer is yes. I would still resort to ALADA each and every time, as long as it gives me the diagnosis.
Thank you so much, speakers. I wonder if our panelists have something to add to the thoughts of our speakers here before I proceed with the closing. All right, so yes, I guess none. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the close of this enlightening session, please allow me to extend our deepest appreciation to our distinguished speakers, Dr. Maricar Reyes, to Sir Art Consolacion, and Dixie Rizalin Maturan. Thank you so much. And we hope to hear more of you again next time as we host the next CPD Asia, probably next year. But before we part, I know everybody's excited and delighted to know about the July CPD Asia session. And to give an invitation is Mr. Yusuf Iskandar, the International Affairs Director of Perhimpunan Radiographer Indonesia, PARI. Sir Yusuf, are you there?
Mr. Yusuf? Or I will deliver, Mr. Yusuf?
All right, so please welcome Mr. Putu Adi Susanta of PARI.
Thank you, Ma'am Pichi. I would like to share my screen.
And please open your camera so we can see you.
Thank you, Ma'am Pichi. So, my name is Putu Adi Susanta, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Secretary General of Indonesian Society of Radiographers, PARI. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving us chance. We would like to invite you all to an upcoming CPD Asia event happening next month. We are excited to announce that the 64th CPD Asia topic is a single disease, 3 imaging modalities, 1 radiographer perspective. We have invited 2 brilliant expert speakers to share their insights. First is Mr. Hidayat Agus Sabarudin. You know, he is our previous Secretary General, and now he is the head of Radiographer Collegium in Indonesia. So Mr. Hidayat will take us through the clinical journey, which title is From Chest X-ray to CT Thorax Imaging Pathway in Pulmonary TB. And next, the second speaker is Mr. Ahmad Subarkah, will explore a fascinating technique, thoracic ultrasound in TB beyond pleural effusion. So the event will held next month, Saturday, July the 25th, 2026, 9 a.m. till 11 a.m. in the morning Indonesian time. So maybe in Philippines is, sorry, this is the, later we update, yeah. It still written at 3 p.m., but the last update is 9 a.m. in the morning. So we will update. This is still the Indonesian posters. So don't miss the event, and we will see you at the next CPD in July. Thank you very much, Pichi.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Brother Putu Adi Susanta, for that very interesting factual invitation. We shall save that date, and we look forward to presence of everyone here once again as we further strengthen our shared commitment to professional growth and excellence. So as I conclude, on behalf of CPD Asia, we express our deepest gratitude to all the officers and organizing committee of the Philippine Association of Radiologic Technologists, PART, for graciously hosting the 63rd CPD Asia program. Our sincerest thanks also to VT Healthcare Vietnam, to all our Zoom sponsors, our appreciation, of course, to the CPD Asia IT team, and our heartfelt thanks to presidents, to all the officers, our speakers, panelists, especially our registered active participants and live audience in YouTube.
Pichi, hello.
Yes, sir.
Hello, Pichi. I just give me a few seconds because actually I couldn't unmute my phone earlier. I want to give my appreciation to all 3 speakers.
Yes, please welcome.
They did it very well. Very good English and good pronunciation, good presentation, and good speeches. And congratulations to all of them. And thank you, Pichi, for your presentation also as well. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, President of Sri Lanka Association of Radiologic Technologists, President Wimalasena Garmage. So as I continue now, again, we would like to say thank you to all our active participants, registered participants in Zoom, and those who are watching us live in YouTube. Again, we value your presence, your enthusiasm,